Hello everybody, I'm Jeanette and you're visiting the Neal's Homestead. We're a little bit delinquent on getting a garden tour out, so today we're going to take care of that and we're going to walk around and see what's growing on the homestead. Thanks for joining me. Well, let's start out by looking at what we call greenhouse number 4. It's actually a high tunnel. There's never been any kind of heat source in here, so it's just a hoop house where we plant in the ground, and it's covered. On the east side, where we have our cucumbers here and the cherry tomatoes here, it's beginning to look like a jungle. I have to fight all the time to keep each of them on their own side, but they're doing very well, so I'm not going to complain about it. We're starting to be able to pick a lot of cucumbers along here. In fact, I took some boxes of them to the Amish produce auction this morning to sell. Well, east of the cucumbers and along this wall here, old guy planted a good row of green beans, and they came up really good and they're growing really well. So we got a good start on that. I came through here the other day and tried to clean up a lot of the weeds that were growing, and so I think that they've got a good start. In typical fashion, the cherry tomatoes are going crazy. Right about here is the top of the panel, and they're up above it. I keep tying them up, but when they get so tall, they're going to eventually fall over because there's nowhere to tie them above that. And we'll just have to do our best to let them lay down in a way that they're not going to break. Right across from the cherry tomatoes is my row of 25 Roma tomatoes that were shorter than everything else. They are still a little bit shorter, but my goodness, they have filled out. And they're doing really great too. Just beyond the Roma tomatoes on the north end is the beginning of the Mountain Merit tomatoes. They go finish out this row, and then they go down this next row. This greenhouse is 90 some feet long, and so we've got a lot of tomatoes here. We planted about 130 tomato plants between the cherry tomatoes, the Romas, and the Mountain Merits. On the north end of where we planted the green beans, and again to the east of all these cucumbers, we planted some zucchini because it was so wet and the zucchini needed to be planted. We've been picking a few and having plenty to eat. Along the west side of number 4, we have our pepper plants. And then I have a huge amount of beets in here. We've been eating all the beets we want. My intention is to can a lot of beets this year, and maybe I wouldn't have to grow as many to can next year. We could just grow a few for fresh eating. I like the idea of canning a whole bunch of something one year and kind of skipping it the next year. Between 2 different batches of beets, we have some more pepper and 3 eggplants. It's pretty hot in here. Down here we actually planted more beets, and they're trying to come up, but as you maybe can see, there's an awful lot of weeds coming up along with them. That's going to be a big fight to try to claim that back.
We had some extra flowers after we planted what we kind of wanted to this year, so we decided to plant a little patch in front of each greenhouse. I think it might make them look a lot prettier, and it's going to take quite a bit of water this time of year to keep them alive.
Here's greenhouse number 3 with lots of onions growing. They're starting to get some sizable bulbs on them, and I think before long we'll be pulling some up and taking them to the produce auction. Number 2 is pretty much the same as number 3. Here's the asparagus bed with a bunch of volunteer squashes that were in the mulch. The seeds were in the mulch. I think from what I can see, what they're doing in there, I think that most of those are spaghetti squash, which is not our favorite. We really would prefer if there were some butternut squash because we all enjoy those more than the spaghetti squash. So there's number one over there. There's the hoop trellis with the peas growing around them that aren't doing very well. And then I planted some watermelon, cantaloupes, and delicatas in here. They're suffering from it being kind of hot and dry. We go from too wet to too dry, of course. Then we have basil. I think I put 10 basil plants in there because I hope I can make some pesto to put in the freezer. I planted 6 new hills of zucchini and they're starting to pop up. We filled up inside the hoop with some more soil so that it was kind of low in there, I think because the dog got in there and dug around and laid in the summertime when it was shaded. That was his bed. So we're going to try to grow some summertime lettuce in there, and probably at this point going to put shade cloth over the top. Back here is where we planted more onions. We were about a week behind those onions that we planted in the other high tunnels. They also had to deal with all the rain that we had, where the other onions were protected from that. So I think these are a little less far along, if that's the way you say it. But I think they're doing okay. That's the size of the bulb underneath the plastic. So really they're not too far different than the other. That's a pretty good size onion. Look at that. Let's go. I guess I need to show you the ugly parts too. This is our cabbage. And then down that way is our broccoli that just isn't doing very well because of all the rain. And I don't know what we'll get out of it. There's the cabbage. It's really tiny, but it looks like it's going to make something in there eventually. Since it looks like there could be some hope for the broccoli and the cabbage, we decided to go ahead and till up the soil and see if we can get some air in this packed down soil, and then we'll water it up real good and see if we can get at least something out of this crop right here. To the south of the onion patch, we put up 3 cattle panels down through here, and we planted our tomatillos and our ground cherries. I've tied them up to that one time so far. I can't say that they look all that wonderful. A lot of the problem with them is that I had to hold them so long in the greenhouse in their containers before I could plant them out here that I think it didn't really do them any good. This is some of the pak choy that we planted, and it's all gone to seed. Starting here and going down about, I think, 30 or 40 plants, I've got some okra. I can't wait to get some okra again. Past the okra, there's eggplant. Then beyond that, I've got peppers down there. We also have some green beans that were planted out here, and then it rained again, of course, and it packed it down, but we've got several of them coming up through. Got 2 rows. Over here's where we're growing our potatoes in the straw. I've got them covered up a little bit more. I don't know how they'll do because they got awful wet and drowned too. Now let's head down to the yard and I'll show you my flowers. In the past, I haven't always had time for flowers because the market gardening business is very demanding, and when you're not doing something, you should be doing something to promote it, take care of it, or whatever. But this year, I'm able to do some gardening in the yard with flowers, and I'm really enjoying them. We had a circle out here that I planted a lot of cannas in, and then around that I alternated with salvia, different colored salvia, not just red ones, and then different colored petunias all the way around the circle. And it sure is striking. And I think when these cannas get big enough that they're blooming on top, it's just going to be absolutely gorgeous, and I'm going to be so happy. I have 5 baskets of purple petunias and pink. Man, I can't remember what those are called right now, those other little flowers in there. And they've done well. I have to make sure I keep them watered well because they don't like to get dried out. On the floor, I have 3 baskets of red geraniums. There's my mother-in-law tongue that I brought out of the house and put out here. It's liking that. There's a magnolia tree that I'm hoping to get planted this fall. Down here I planted gazanias, salvia, and the marigolds. At the end of my house I planted all of these marigolds in the back, and then salvia, and then these beautiful gazanias all along the front. They are all different colors, and you can plant them really close together so you can get a lot of different colors splashed throughout. This side of my house is basically southwest facing, and it gets really hot here. So I chose these 3 kinds of flowers because they can tolerate the heat, and they actually do pretty good when it's dry. We put some wood chips down as mulch, so I think they'll probably be able to take it here real good, and we'll have good color all summer long. So that's my Overdue garden tour, and I appreciate you staying this long, and I appreciate you coming, and I hope I'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.